All right, this has to be one of my favorite parts of the entire topic of combinatorics, mainly because it is just pure algebra. Anything algebra is always going to be more enjoyable. Some of the combinatorics topics, and you'll see that as we get to the examples, are very wordy, and one of the reasons why I don't love the topic generally is sometimes it's hard to figure out what the question actually wants you to do. Well, these algebra ones, whilst can be a little bit tricky, you always know what we're trying to do, and that's what makes these questions super fun. So, I want to zoom in here a little bit. I've got n plus 1 factorial divided by n factorial. Well, this is very, very similar to the example we looked at in the last video where I had 10 factorial divided by 3 factorial times 8 factorial, where, again, I'm trying to match my denominator. So I want to make n plus 1 factorial divided by n factorial. I want to make n plus 1 factorial into an expression with the term n factorial. Okay, so if I had something like n plus 1 factorial, well, I can write that as simply being n plus 1, I'll put that in brackets, multiplied by n multiplied by n minus 1, and I could keep going forever until I guess I reach minus infinity, right? But again, we saw this in the previous video. When I had 10 factorial, I can simplify, and hopefully this makes sense. I can simplify, instead of writing the entire chain, I can say, okay, well, that is n plus 1 factorial multiplied by n factorial. I don't need to write the whole sequence or the whole sequence forever. See, I told you I get used to the mirroring eventually. The whole series forever and ever. So if I now consider my denominator, I simply have n factorial. I've made them match, okay? This is, like I said, it seems so simple. Every time I give these examples to students, they struggle the first time. So it's just worth going through and seeing, okay, this is how it works. I can now again cancel. N factorial divided by n factorial is simply going to give a value of 1, and I'm left with an answer of just n plus 1. Now there is a part B, and part B is a little bit, it's actually quite a bit harder than part A. Now, when we get algebraic fractions, there's so many different strategies for how we can deal with these. There's actually a really nice and really simple way to deal with this question specifically. If you see that, feel free to comment that down below. I'm going to go for what I call a more robust method of like, what are things we should be identifying and recognizing? What is going to help later in the topic? What is going to help in future topics as well? And that is, how do we deal with these algebraic fractions? The way we deal with algebraic fractions, typically when I have split fractions like this, is the first thing I should consider at least, is creating a common denominator so I can simply add my numerators. Okay, so if I make a common denominator, I'm going to multiply my first fraction by n plus 1 factorial, and on top I'm going to multiply by n plus 1 factorial. I now want to do the exact same process in reverse. I'm going to multiply this side by n factorial. I'm going to multiply this side by n factorial. So I'm going to go about doing that. I wind up with n plus 1 factorial plus n factorial all over n factorial outside of n plus 1 factorial. You could write that order the other way around as well. That is totally fine. In fact, I'm going to do that because I think it just looks a little bit nice. I'm just going to pull that across to that side, bring that across there. Okay, so hopefully we followed how I created my combined fractions. I make a common denominator, which is just simply multiplying my denominators together. Then I basically cross multiply, add my two numerators. My numerators become n plus 1 factorial and n factorial. Add those together. I wind up with my top line. So what do I do from here? I've got all these exclamation marks everywhere. Well, again, I want to try to figure out ways to cancel out with my denominator, and it's algebra. So the only way I can cancel a denominator when I have like numbers, or I have algebraic fractions is by finding a common factor. Well, if I consider my numerator here, I have n factorial, I have n plus 1 factorial. I can write that similar to the previous example. That can become n plus 1 multiplied by n factorial plus n factorial all divided by n plus 1 factorial multiplied by n factorial. So a lot of exclamation marks, okay? But hopefully we can identify, hey, I've got a common factor here and here. Both terms are multiplied by n factorial. I can now take this term and I can bring it out the front. I can take a common factor out the front. And part of why this topic is difficult and why people don't like the factorial fractions is we have to be pretty good with our algebra. We have to be very good at creating our combined fractions. We have to be very good at identifying common factors. So I take my common factor out the front. I wind up with n factorial outside of n plus 1, do a double bracket, plus 1 is going to go inside my brackets. Again, if we're a little bit unsure about how I do that, if I multiply in n factorial times n plus 1 gives n plus 1 times n factorial, and n factorial times 1 gives n factorial. So that's how we take our common factors out. My denominator is going to stay the same. That is n plus 1 factorial multiplied by n factorial. I'm now going to cancel. I can cancel out my n factorial and my n factorial out the front. Once I've done that, I'm very close to my answer. I now have inside my brackets, I have n plus 1 all divided by n plus 1 factorial. So my final answer is simply just going to be n plus 2 over n plus 1 factorial. And it's totally fine to have a factorial on my denominator. There's no way for me to cancel that out. So this is considered a fully simplified answer. And it is a very common question that people struggle with. If we can do both of these two questions, both the first part and the second part, this part is genuinely quite tough in terms of algebra, you will be fine. This is actually, in my opinion, one of the hardest types of questions that we have in the entire topic of combinatorics, simply because there is so many small skills that goes into solving something like this. We have to be good with fractions, we have to be good with common factors, we have to be pretty good at being able to take common factors out and cancel stuff down and manipulate terms. So if you can do that, I personally would be feeling fantastic. If not, feel free to rewatch that bit, maybe try it yourself. I actually would recommend that. I would pause the video, try this question yourself, and then replay and see if you can actually get it right and remember all the different steps. And I will see you guys in the next video.